Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national television channel Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, India's major strategic partnerships, and also challenges and threats that India faces as it rises to the next level in the international order. Viewers, in this episode, we are looking at a vexing and persistent problem that India has faced from Canada. Anti-India separatist, terrorist, extremist, and criminal networks have taken root in Canada for a long time and have become a source of major conflict between the two countries, causing diplomatic rift and also questions about how Western liberal democracies are able to tackle this menace. So in this episode, we are going to be looking at the Khalistan problem that has taken root in Canada, why it has such a deep and pervasive presence there, and what can be done to try and overcome this menace. To discuss this, I'm very privileged to be joined by a very senior Canadian journalist and writer, Terry Milewski. He is the author of this very important book, Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. It gives a blow-by-blow account of the Khalistan cancer that has been spreading into the body politic of many countries with a special focus on Canada. Viewers, this book is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand especially the link between Canada and the Khalistan problem. And it's a bestseller and has been widely read and quoted. So really privileged to have you on the show, Terry. Welcome.
Thanks for the invitation.
Terry, so there is this massive flare-up between India and Canada with expulsion of diplomats on both sides, and it's not looking pretty, and we would have liked to have friendly relations, but they're getting worse. And you've been a long-time observer of this problem and have written so much and have documented it so extensively in this book and in all your writings and your shows. So it will be helpful for our viewers to begin with, to understand why Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is upping the ante, going public and repeatedly accusing India of things, when India has been asking for the Khalistani terrorists to be brought to justice for such a long time. But instead now Canada is trying to say that the problem is with India's behavior and not with Canada's behavior. So it will be really useful for us to begin with, to understand Justin Trudeau and his politics and how this is linked to this latest round of accusations.
Well, politics may have something to do with it, to put it mildly. As you know, Trudeau is at a low ebb in the polls, and the pollsters predict that he will almost certainly lose the next election next year. It's expected in Canada. And so this has given rise to many conspiracy theories about how Trudeau is trying to dream up these accusations in order to prove on political standing. I believe these theories are nonsense. Firstly, and most significantly, because it wouldn't boost his standing. The Canadians pay very little attention to this trial. They've already decided, according to the pollsters, that Trudeau is toast. It won't make any difference one way or the other whether things go well with India or not. I need only add, as an indicator of what I'm talking about, that on the anniversary last year of the Air India bombing of 1985, the worst terrorist attack in Canadian history, 300 civilians slaughtered for nothing, that the Indian side repeatedly warned Canada that these plots were afoot, that they were going to try to smuggle explosives onto the plane, and Canada just ignored it. They put that warning on the shelf. That was 3 weeks before the bomb. Yeah. So there's a very long and sad history of indifference on the part of Canada to India's complaints. And I personally believe that Indian anger about this, which has been building now for 40 years and more, is entirely justified. At the same time, India has done not a stellar job, let's say, to put it politely, of presenting evidence that would stand up in a Canadian court. It's all very well to say, well, we've designated Part 1 speaks for justice as a terrorist. Therefore, he's a terrorist, and you're supposed to just accept that without any evidence. And what? What are we supposed to do with it? He hasn't broken any Canadian law. He doesn't face any Canadian charges. There is free speech in Canada. That is not going to change. It's a free speech country. So there's a tug of war between the two. India has become angry, and now we find ourselves in the position where India, according to these allegations from Trudeau and from the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted, has gone too far, has crossed the line into illegality. Now, there is another problem that I will mention because it's timely. That is that India today, as you have seen in the headlines, is again accusing Trudeau of making false allegations. So these are baseless allegations. At the same time, simultaneously, India is looking at the same allegations from the United States, the FBI, and saying, oh, take this very seriously. We're going to appoint a high-level committee. The committee is traveling to the United States. I think they're there now.
Yeah.
And so it's confusing, and it makes the Indian side, of course, in a very difficult position because they've got to pick a lane. Are these allegations absurd when they come from Trudeau and be taken seriously when they come from the Biden administration? Well, why is that? They're the same allegation. And those two, no. These are separate files, I think, are fooling you. If you read the American indictment, and I urge your viewers to do that, look at paragraph 6, for example. Look at paragraph 28. You can Google it. And you will see the suspect in that case assuring his hired hitman that, don't worry, Fanoon is a target of our murder plot, and so is Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia in Canada. One plot, any target.
Yeah. Point taken, Terry. In fact, you made this also in the book, the comparison between the US, UK, Germany on one hand, where there is a significant Sikh diaspora and also a small minority among them who are the radical Khalistanis who are based in these countries also. But of course, they're also in Canada. But you made the point in the book that from Canada, they've been a lot more capable of carrying out violent activities and of causing a bigger headache for India than from the other countries. And you've used the term safer haven. And Canada has been a safer haven than most other countries. So on that point, I think the difference, the way we are seeing it is that, it's not Joe Biden, the president, who's coming out and openly, accusing India in the US case or in Australia or in the UK or in Germany, right? But here you have the Canadian Prime Minister himself going public and repeatedly making these allegations, which has ruffled feathers. So on the Canada point, the exceptional role of Canada, I'd like you to please go in a little deeper and explain to our viewers. You've said Canada has a congenial legal and political environment in which these terrorists have been thriving. So what is this politics? I mean, we keep saying that it's domestic politics in Canada, but it will be helpful for our viewers to understand why Canadian politicians of different hues, but especially the Liberals under Justin Trudeau and their coalition partners, the Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, these two parties have in particular pandered to the Khalistani threats and pressure and inducements much more than the Conservatives, although you have shown that all types of Canadian politicians are wary of upsetting these Khalistanis. So how is it that a small minority within a minority, which went and settled in Canada, has become is able to act with so much impunity? And why are these politicians scared of taking on the Khalistanis? It will be helpful for our viewers to know.
If you find out, let me know, because this is a very difficult question to understand. And in order to cut to the chase, I will be unkind about my fellow Canadians. Politicians have been lazy and dumb and ignorant by buying the propaganda. They have been patsies. So the propaganda that India is a murderous state, is committing a genocide of the Sikhs, and this genocide has allegedly been going on for 40 years. Ever since the time of Indira Gandhi, this genocide of India The politicians in Canada go, "Oh, that's terrible. Oh, we're very sympathetic." They know nothing of the history of this matter. They know nothing of the vast majority of Sikhs in India. 75% of the world's Sikhs live in Punjab. They have no interest in having a separate state. They are loyal Indians, and they are sick and tired of the separatist nonsense, and they remember well the 20,000 people who died in the bloody Sikh insurgency in the 1980s and the early 1990s. So the Canadian politicians don't know about that. All they know is that somebody comes to them from the local Gurdwara, and they say, "Look, I can snap my fingers at the temple and give 5,000 votes in the next election if you sing my song. But if you don't, I can have them vote the other way." So the politicians then of all parties, I don't include the Conservatives, all parties happily show up at Vaisakhi parades featuring life-size posters glorifying the great martyr, the Air India bomber, the author of that massacre in 1985, Govinda Parmar. They treat him as a hero, a martyr of the Sikh nation, they say. And the politicians smile away and hustle for votes. And this has become normal in Canada. Completely normal. Brampton, Ontario. The truck goes down on the festival day through the middle of the city, carrying a colorful diorama illustrating and celebrating the assassination in 1984 of Indira Gandhi, October the 31st of 1984, with lots of red paint splashed on her sari so that kids don't the message. It was a great event, and we spilled plenty of blood. So Canadian politicians have been naive and gullible. They've been sucked in by this propaganda about this alleged genocide, and it works for them. They've got a nice little arrangement. They pretend, if you ask them, that they were looking the other way. Well, we didn't see these posters of Parmar. Who's Parmar anyway?
Right.
Many Canadians have no clue. So it's not a great explanation to answer your question, but it gets you halfway there.
Yeah. So this in India we call this vote bank politics, and I think that's a version of that is happening in Canada.
In Canada too, yes.
Terry, the other question is ideological, and you've made an important point in Blood for Blood that in the name of multiculturalism and liberal values and free speech, or even anti-racism, these kinds of tropes have been repeatedly used to prevent any crackdown on these hardline extremists who are being called Canadian citizens, or who Trudeau is calling activists, or Sikh preachers or religious figures. But when we have mountains of evidence of them being involved in extremely violent transnational actions, so this whole multiculturalism game, it seems like it's benefited the Khalistanis. And of course, Canada is known for multiculturalism and being, able to accommodate different types of minorities. But looks like it has gone too far. And you also quoted victims of the Air India bombing 1985 and their relatives of the victims, saying that in a rule of law society we should not be allowing religious minorities to run amok and do whatever they like, and they should be actually conforming to the basic liberal values, which they are not. So let's talk a bit about this racism and multiculturalism issue and how it has been manipulated, it seems, by these extremists in a democracy like Canada.
Yes, well, I spoke of naivety on the part of the politicians, and this is a good example of it that you've raised, and I think you're right to raise it, that if you criticize Khalistani violence, they call you a racist. If though Khalistanis were erased, they erased. And they say, alternatively, they say, well, you're anti-Sikh. So, if I don't like Nazis, am I anti-German? No. All Germans are not Nazis. It's absurd. But that is the game that they play. They play the game of label so that they paint you as being anti the whole people, all of the seats, most of whom oppose their agenda of separatism, they say that you're disrespecting them. You criticize Khalistani violence, notwithstanding that most Canadians don't know it, that most seats can't stand the separatists and persistently vote against them, to the point that the vote for peaceful separatists who run in Punjab elections cannot win a seat.
Terry, the other point you made was that the legal and the law enforcement system in Canada has also been in some ways exploited. The loopholes and the weaknesses in them have been exploited,
Yes.
and most of the cases, very few convictions, and even though there seems to be a lot of evidence, it's ultimately doesn't come to conviction, and they're not being sent to jail. So on this matter, could you also tell us how this happens? I mean, you have explained this in the book, but for our audiences who are watching the show, normally we assume that advanced industrialized countries like Canada, developed countries, they have a sound judicial system, and that the prosecution can bring the case to fruition. But it's not happened in the case of Khalistanis. You talked about the curse of the Khalistanis and how it keeps on haunting people and how they get away with blood on their hands. So it's one side is the politics, but even the legal system has not been up to the mark, isn't it?
It's been an abject failure. I would differ with your question in this respect. You said I explained it in my book. I don't think there's any explanation. I don't think I did a very good job of explaining it. It's inexplicable that the Canadian legal system bent over backwards to backflip to accommodate the most outrageous objections by the Council of Air India. Well, evidence that was damning was all excluded. I mean, all the best evidence was thrown out. The plotters of the Air India bombing were under police surveillance, under surveillance by CSIS, security agency in Canada, for 3 months before the bombing, and they still didn't figure out what they were up to. Didn't take it seriously. And the legal system, which is hugely sensitive to making sure everyone has equity, extended gift after gift to the defense counsel. I sat through the whole trial. I saw it happen. The wiretaps, no, we can't use those because the original trade. Oh, this witness, no. This witness was scared of being killed. So they were silent on the witness stand. So we can't count their evidence, even though they gave sworn statement what they heard and saw previously. And this witness who died, who was assassinated in his car, Mara Singh Hare, we can't use his evidence either, even though he too, his sworn statements on videotape, we can't use his evidence because, oh, well, he's not here to cross-examine, so we'll just throw it all out. The legal system has a lot to answer. You're right to point out that it failed Canadians in the case of Air India. Right. I apologize. I'm going to have to go in 1 minute, but how about a last quick one?
I'll wrap it up now for you, Terry. India and Canada, historically, we have always had a large immigrant community there, and a lot of positive things in this relationship. It should have been a friendly or even a strategic partnership like we have with the US. But for whatever reason, things have gone adrift, and a lot of it you have explained has to do with the domestic politics in your country. But what is the hope for the future? We would like to have friendly relations, but with Justin Trudeau in power, we are not able to see any hope.
Yeah, I see your point. I'll be brief, and I apologize again for having to go so quickly. The outlook, I think, is that both countries must. The only way out is if both countries acknowledge the miscalculation, the gross mistake. India clearly thought that it could get away with more than it legally can in Canada, and Canada thought that it could get away with indulging Khalistanis, ignoring Indian needs, so they were willing. Both sides must change that. Both sides will have to reach an accommodation, figure out how they're going to deal with the culprits in the various crimes that Canada alleges, do what the Americans have already done in getting during quiet arrest of an Indian government official implicated there and named by the Washington Post. And, uh, and I won't say sweep it all under the rug, but at least counter it all, try to get diplomatic relations back on track. You and I, I'm sure, you and I hope that they achieve this recovery, because they need to. These are two good countries, democracies, and we need to wish them the best in their future flourishing relationship. But it may take a while.
It may take a while. Thank you, Terry Milewski.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And viewers, the sum of this conversation with noted Canadian journalist Terry Milewski is that there is a Khalistan problem in Canada. It's quite deep-rooted, and he has explained the political as well as the legal side to this problem. And his book, which I have recommended for you, Blood for Blood, gives actually a blow-by-blow account of how the Khalistan problem has festered and grown bigger and bigger in Canada. And of course, both countries would like to have friendly relations, and this is not how accusations, when they're made publicly by a head of a government, it does not show a certain leadership dignity and decency. So obviously people are upset in India, but in the long run, nobody is in power forever. And in the long run, we expect that we can improve Canada-India relations. And Canada-India relations, because of the large presence of Indian origin diaspora there, not only Sikh diaspora, but also Hindu diaspora. It's a very large group, and it's growing and it's influential. We would expect that eventually we can restore the people-to-people linkages and make them stronger. And of course, we have to address the cancer of Khalistan. If we are not able to overcome this menace, which has been using Canada as a safe haven and as a harbor from which to shoot at us in India, I don't think we will be able to reach any accommodation. So of course, all sides have to make compromises, and that's how ruptured relationships ultimately are overcome, and we will be able to find peace and friendship again. But do keep in mind that as long as the root causes of the problem are not addressed in Canada itself, it's going to be a very difficult task. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.